about autism and mental state attribution. Now, autism as a disorder. Now, autism as a disorder provides an opportunity to investigate the role of theory of mind abilities in navigating our social environments. Researchers have predicted that a range of impairments in autism are concerned with these theory of mind abilities. Now, if the predictions were to be correct, then we should see differences in many of the neural regions involved in person perception between autistic people and controls. Anatomical studies suggest that a host of brain abnormalities can be associated with autism. For example, Eric Kushen and colleagues at the UCSD have observed infants tend to have small heads. Infants with autism tend to have small head circumferences in the first year of life. These abnormalities persist over the developmental lifespan, and studies suggest that autism is associated with reduced volume in a range of brain areas. For example, the frontal lobes, the superior temporal sulcus, the amygdala, the cerebellum, and the hippocampus. Now, anatomical changes in autism are also found to be accompanied by changes in the connectivity patterns in the brain. For instance, researchers have observed hyperconnectivity within the frontal lobe regions and decreased long range connectivity and reciprocal connections with other cortical regions. Autism has also been associated with abnormal functioning in a number of brain regions associated with person perception, including the medial prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, the fusiform face area, the superior temporal sulcus, the anterior insula, and the TPJ, which is the temporoparietal junction. These findings suggest that not a single brain area or even a single network is completely responsible for the behavior of autistic individuals. Finally, although different regions of the brain support our ability to make sense of other people's minds and read the socially relevant visual cues, the study of autism suggests that these regions might be working as a single network. Now, autistic individuals find it extremely hard to perform the false belief tasks. Even when the autistic children are well past the age at which the normal children can do these tasks, autistic children perform as if all the characters in the task have access to all the information in the story. Lombardo and colleagues were investigating the neural systems that are specifically responsible for impairments in representing mental state information in autistic individuals. They examined whether deficits for autistic individuals are observed in processing information about both the self and the other, and also if abnormal functioning of the neural systems relates to the variation in impairment. So they came up with a mentalizing task, one that would elicit robust activation in all the regions within the standard circuit known to be engaged in normal individuals while thinking about both the self and the others. These regions were the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, and the bilateral temporoparietal junction. The researchers found that the right temporoparietal junction functioned abnormally in autistic individuals, in that it was less responsive and slightly non-specific in its activations, implying that it could not distinguish between the thoughts about oneself and others and physical judgments. The lack of specificity was found to be correlated with the degree of social impairment, or in other words, the less selective the RTPJ was, the more impaired the individuals were in representing the mental state of others. Another important characteristic of autistic individuals is that they do not pay attention to eye gaze as much as normal individuals do. Moreover, there are also suggestions that autistic individuals might avoid eye contact with others because they find it unpleasant. Now, a recent study combined EEG with skin conductance responses to explore whether frontal EEG symmetry as an index of approach avoidance brain activity could resolve whether another person's eye gaze is arousing or aversive to autistic individuals. It was found that a direct gaze with either normally open eyes or wide open eyes evoked neither an approach nor a avoidance related response in children with autism spectrum disorder. Although they observed that the autonomic arousal for faces increased as a function of the amount of sclera visible in the direct gaze. So it seems that these children were basically, they did not really show any kind of avoidance response or approach response towards the eye gaze. They are not really interacting with it at all. This differs from the response of normally developing children for whom the eyes open evoked an approach response, whereas the eyes wide open leads to an avoidance response. Because you know that eyes wide open is a bit of a expression of, let us say, fear or something like that, and therefore it will not really invite people to make eye contact with something like that. These findings do not support the suggestion that direct gaze is an aversive stimulus for children with autism. In fact, they support an alternate hypothesis which was earlier proposed by Amy Klein and her colleagues at uh, Yale University, according to which individuals with autism may just fail to recognize the importance of eye gaze as a cue to understanding their social worlds. In their study, while participants were watching the movie Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, it was discovered that normal individuals spend much of their viewing time paying attention to the characters' faces and eyes to gain an understanding of the characters' intentions and feelings, whereas autistic individuals mostly fixated on the mouth, the bodies, and the other objects in the scene. More support from this hypothesis comes from a range of studies showing that autistic individuals exhibit significantly less activation in the STS when performed when performing theory of mind tasks. Moreover, in the checkerboard task described earlier, these individuals showed increased STS activation to any shift in gaze rather than specifically in response to gaze shift to unexpected locations. Now, a failure to pay attention to eye gaze in autistic individuals may also be accounted for by the smaller size of their amygdala, which is a characteristic of autism. So, in a previous chapter, I believe we've talked about that amygdala size is correlated with the amount of attention people pay to eyes. And because autistic individuals have smaller amygdala, it might corroborate or it might explain why individuals with autism are able to pay less attention to eyes of others. Now, if you combine all of these studies together, it would indicate that neural regions associated with person perception do not function in the same way in autistic individuals as they do for normal people. It can therefore be said that autism may be associated with reduced function or volume in selected brain regions and also sometimes associated with more inclusive activation that is not sensitive to subtle social cues. Now, more recently, researchers have determined that autism spectrum disorder should be approached by a systems level approach, implying that the brain is made up of multiple distinct interacting networks, and the complex symptomatology of the ASD could be best understood if approached from such a vantage point. So the idea is because the brain has so many different distinct networks, and the symptoms of autism spectrum disorders kind of vary across the board. It seems that in order to best understand the autism spectrum disorder, it might be that we understand each of the system from a specific network's point of view, and basically, therefore, we'll be able to understand how different networks within the brain are all affected in different ways by the autism spectrum disorder. So, on a systems level, it has been suggested that autism may affect the default mode brain network of the autistic individuals. So, as we've seen earlier in the chapter, that the medial prefrontal cortex is part of the brain network that has a higher rate of metabolism at rest, and that this activity may be self-referential and social processing. The relationship between autism and atypicality of the medial prefrontal cortex functioning may also be extended to this region's baseline mode of activity. It has been therefore observed that when healthy individuals engage in thinking that diverts their attention away from self-referential processing, they experience a degree of deactivation in the MPFC. However, autistic individuals do not experience this deactivation. Autistic individuals do not experience significantly less activity in their MPFC when they are performing non self referential tasks. So, this deactivation is not really experienced by the autistic individuals. So, the question could be asked that whether this MPFC or whether the default mode brain network is always on or is it always off in these autistic individuals. Now, data from this study basically points out in the always off direction. More specifically, researchers point out that the PET studies are consistent with the always off conclusion. Indeed, participants with ASD report very different types of thoughts when their mind is at rest. For instance, two out of the three patients reported in this study just reported seeing only images but no internal speech and feeling of bodily sensations. The third patient appeared to have no inner thoughts at all and could only describe his current actions. Canadian colleagues in 2006 estimated that an absence of this resting state activity in autistic individuals may be directly linked to the differences in internal. Researchers have also reported that the extent of these resting state abnormalities for autistic individuals can correlate with the severity of their social impairments. So here you can see that the default mode network, basically, if it's probably not active at all in the autistic individuals, which you can see that can explain let's say, can explain their deficits in personal and social processing, and it could kind of be used to explain their other social impairments as well. Now, it has been proposed that one of the possible causes of autism could be that they have unusually slow metabolic rates in the MPFC, which could imply that the autistic individuals are actually never mentally prepared for the type of social thought that marks social cognition. And there is some evidence for this idea as well. Say, for example, when autistic individuals are given explicit instructions to use a social process, say, for example, pay attention to faces or facial expressions, specific brain regions then begin to be activated in the high functioning ASD individuals, but not when they are given ambiguous instructions or vague instructions. It seems that these individuals are not automatically or instinctively inclined to engage in social processing, which probably explains the inactivity in the social processing or personal processing areas of. Now, Mitchell puts forward this idea that if the autistic individuals are not constantly engaged in intensive social processing like many normal individuals, they should be freer to attend to objects, other objects, visual spatial features, and non social aspects of their environment. Indeed, many autism spectrum individuals are unusually adept in visuospatial and other kinds of non social domains, for example, musical or drawing talent, puzzle solving aptitude, or solving complex mathematical problems. Most autism spectrum disorder individuals typically have at least one non social ability, which seems to arise from resources that are unburdened by the complexities of social processing. Moving further, researchers have also proposed that the mirror neuron system in the autism spectrum disorder individuals may be compromised. Now, while developmental psychologists have pointed out that imitative behavior may be crucial for the development of social cognitive skills, and humans have the ability to automatically imitate each other during social interactions, it should also be known that the more two individuals will imitate each other, the more empathic they become about each other. However, it is known that autistic individuals have difficulties in exhibiting mimicry and imitation. For instance, autistic children do not exhibit the degree of yawn contagion that is visible in the normal children. Yawn contagion is basically when you are yawning and you look at a person, the person also starts yawning. This is what's called the yawn contagion. Now, this yawn contagion is not really, shown or not really observed so much in the autistic children as it is observed in the normal children. So it seems that the mirror neuron network that sort of is behind this yawn contagion, basically it makes you mimic the other person's action, is not functioning completely normally in autistic individuals. Also, autistic individuals do not show automatic mimicry of facial expressions, although they can voluntarily mimic pictures of faces. So one of the things is that the autistic, typically normal individuals, when they're talking with each other or they're engaged in a social interaction, talking or talking about something, which is emotional or something, it happens that people start imitating each other's facial expression. They get in the same mode to kind of follow the flow of the conversation. Sometimes if somebody is talking to you very angrily, you will not even realize how, and when your facial expressions also change into that of anger, and your voice also raises up and so on. Similarly, if some person is talking kindly to you, even if you are slightly angry or upset, your voice will become kinder and your expressions will change to more calmer expressions. So, this is something that is a very, very important aspect of social communication that automatically is done with individuals. But it seems that with autistic individuals, this aspect is not normally functioning. Now, it has also been suggested that children with autism spectrum disorders are sometimes deficient in understanding the goal of observed motor actions, something that the mirror neurons are actually responsible for. Yui Catania suggested that the primary deficit in mirror neuron systems of autistic children would be the inability in linking initial motor actions into action chains with specific goals and intentions. More specifically, they would find it difficult to respond to the initial motor action by firing a specific action chain based on the initial motor movement. Say, for example, if I'm picking a pen to write, or if I'm picking up a pen, you know exactly what the next action will be. You know that I'm going to write something. Say, for example, if I'm picking, a pastry from a plate in front of me, you know the next action is going to be that I'm going to bring it near my mouth and I'm going to bite it and eat it. Now, these are short action chains. So as soon as the first action is taken, people can automatically predict what is going to happen in the next two or three actions, and they sort of form an action chain which for which the goal and everything is known. Typically, people would be normal individuals would be able to do so, but it seems that the autistic children are not able to do this seamlessly. Another interesting aspect of these action chains is the action chains also help you to predict the observed person's intentions. So that is also something very very important, which it seems that does not really work nicely with the autistic individuals. So Catania suggests that something may be amiss in the ASD children's motor system in this regard. So, to test this hypothesis in his experiment, children with ASD and typically developing children were made to either reach, grasp a piece of food and eat it, or to reach, grasp a piece of paper and place it in a container. In another condition, they observed an experimenter performing these actions in three parts: reaching, grasping, and bringing to the object to the mouth or the container, and eating it or placing it in the container. It was supposed that if an action chain were activated by the initial reaching movement, then the mouth muscle would be activated as soon as a person started for food, but if not, then the muscle would be activated only as the food reached the mouth. In normally developing children, mylohyoid activation, which is basically the muscles in the mouth, activation was present early in the reaching and the grasping phase of the grasping for eating action chain, and when also these people were observing a grasping for eating action. This early activation of the muscle in the final stage of the action indicates that understanding of the final goal of the action takes place early on. However, for children with ASD, the image activation was observed only during the last movement phase of the bringing to mouth action, and no image activation was found when observing the grasp for eat action activation. So, these findings suggest that the individual motor acts are not integrated quickly into an action chain in children with autism spectrum disorder, resulting in their lacking the full comprehension of the intention of others. So, they cannot really make out what the other person is going to do. So, they wait, and in that sense, that sort of hampers their communication. So, intentions can be also understood as consisting of two parts, containing of what a person is doing and why is he doing it. Researchers suggest that the what of a motor act can be understood in two ways. One, through a direct matching mechanism by the help of mirror neurons, and another by using the semantic cues of the object itself. So, just knowing what an object is can cue a person to what motor action will follow. If I'm picking up a pen, you know I'm going to write. If I'm picking up a scissor, you know I'm going to cut. Now, this implies that even if a person's mirror neuron system is not activated, just on the basis of semantic knowledge, you can basically predict what is going to be the next action. Now, about the why of the motor act, especially when it is not related to an object. For example, when the parents of the autistic children extend their arms, the children fail to extend his or her arm in return because they cannot understand why the parents have made that specific gesture in the first place. To understand this kind of behavior, Sonia Boria and colleagues in 2009 investigated whether autistic children understood both the what and the why of an action. The experiment consisted of two parts. In the first part, children with ASD and typically developing children were presented with pictures showing hand interactions with certain objects. Now, in half of the trials, the children observed the hand grip was shown as congruent to the function of the object. Suppose, say, for example, there's a pen, the grasp will be of, holding the pen and writing, and the other half, the grip corresponded to the position typically used to move that object. Say, for example, it will be a pushing sort of an action. Then the children were asked what the individual was doing and why she was doing it. Both sets of children, normal and autistic, could accurately report the what or the goal of the motor acts. So the children with ASD made several errors in the why is she grabbing the object task, and all of the errors occurred in the why place trials, where is why is this thing being pushed to that place. In the second experiment, the children saw the pictures of a hand grip that was compatible to the object's use. The object was placed in the context suggesting it was going to be used or that it was to be placed into a container. Here, both sets of children performed equally, correctly reporting the agent's intent. You can here have a look at the setup of the experiment. You can see this is the what condition. What is it? It is a phone. Why use trial, basically why is this person holding it, is going to use it. Why is the person holding it like this? She is going to place it somewhere. So with the second experiment, what is it? Why is she grasping the object? She is going to cut it. Why is she grasping the object? Here you don't know. Here it's atypical. Now, these researchers concluded that the understanding the intentions of others can occur in two ways. One, by relying on motor information derived from the hand-object interaction, and second, by the semantic information, by using semantic information derived from the object's standard use or the context in which it is being used. Children with ASD show no deficit in the second type of understanding, but they have difficulties in understanding the intention of others when they have to rely exclusively on motor cues. So the semantic knowledge part is all right, but the motor cue part is not really functioning nicely. So in other words, they understand the intention from external cues, not internal ones, and hence it provides additional support for the notion that autism involves a deficit in the mechanisms of the mirror neuron system. This evidence totally suggests that the mirror neuron system is a highly interconnected system and that imitation deficits and some of the other cognitive deficits that are observed in autism may be a result of underconnectivity in the mirror neuron system and the involvement of alternate communication. Finally, it seems that the complicated business of understanding thoughts, goals, intentions, desires, and beliefs of other people is made manifest when we are studying the deficits of children observed with autism spectrum disorder. Finally, the autistic individual's difficulty in understanding other people can be seen in abnormal brain development and function, affecting all of the major neural regions important for person perception and self referential processing. So, I think this is all I wanted to talk about autism. We'll meet for the last lecture. We'll meet for the last part of the chapter in the next lecture. Thank you.